I'm going to call this meeting the Oskaloosa City Council to order. It is Monday, November 4th, 2019. We start with the invocation by Mike Dotson, First Assembly of God.
Let us pray together. Father, it is during this month that many of our hearts turn to being thankful and to think of all the things that we're thankful for. We thank you that you are the God of provision. Father, as we look at our fields and see the harvest that is coming in, we're thankful for the bounty, that every good and perfect gift comes from you. We thank you for the freedoms we enjoy. We thank you, Father, when we look around the rest of the world, all the blessings that we have as a people, may we always be mindful of that and thankful. We pray your blessings on the leaders of this community as they continue to seek the good for this community. We pray that they will seek your counsel and your advice. And that, Father, what decisions they make will be good for the citizens of this great community. We pray these things in the name of Jesus, your Son. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Burnett.
Here.
Caligari.
Here.
Dross.
Here.
Moore.
Here.
Addison. Here. Walling.
Here.
Yates.
Here. Okay. Next item up is the opportunity for community comments. This item is reserved to receive comments from the community for concerns whether or not they're included on the current agenda. The community is encouraged to come and speak before the mayor and city council. Asked to keep statements brief, time limited to no more than 3 minutes. Any questions should be asked of the city staff, the council members, or the mayor prior to speaking to the full council, so concerns can be properly researched and answered away from the meeting. Comments are to be directed to the mayor and city council only. Is there anyone who would like to speak tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on. Next up is the consent agenda. These are all items that are considered routine in nature. I did want to call out on item C that I'm recommending the appointment of Tony Irwin to the Water Board. And then also item K, which is a resolution setting a public hearing for the sale of city-owned property at 1327 9th Avenue East. That's going to be on December 2nd of 2019. And then item L is a resolution setting a public hearing for the sale of city-owned property located at 703 A Avenue East. That's on December 2nd. And then also item M, which is to consider a resolution setting a public hearing for the sale of city-owned property located at 610 D Avenue West. That's also on December 2nd. And then I would also like to remove from the consent agenda item N. This is a resolution amending Resolution 18-04-57. We're going to move that to the next meeting. So with that, do we have a motion to support the consent agenda?
Move.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Well, I was going to ask for discussion on I and N, but I don't have to do N, I guess, now. You want to forgo that, don't you, Mayor?
That's correct.
On I,
This has to
the
do.
city's, go ahead.
Well, this has to do with a resolution affirming a contract with Blomers Construction, installing a 330-foot new sidewalk on A Avenue East, east of 11th Street.
Thank you. But as I read it, the city's paying for it.
Mayor, Council, yes, that's correct. Each year we ask you to authorize funding that would help improve connectivity within the community, and this is one of the sections that was identified, I believe, a couple years ago, but we ran into some cost issues and then timing with the bids, and so it was put off until this fiscal year. But yeah, this is funded by the city, and that's how we've completed the active transportation plan.
That's it.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Roll call, please.
Burnett.
Yes.
Caligari.
Yes.
Dross.
Yes.
Moore.
Yes.
Addison.
Yes.
Walling.
Yes.
Yates.
Yes.
Okay, that passes. Gets us into the regular agenda. Item A, that's the announcement of vacancies we have on various boards and commissions. First is the Airport Commission. We have a vacancy for a 6-year term that begins on January 1st of 2020. and a vacancy for a term ending on December 31st of 2021. Board of Adjustment, there are 2 vacancies for 5-year terms that begin on January 1st of 2020, 1 vacancy for a term ending on December 31 of 2020. Building Code Board of Appeals, we have 1 vacancy for an ex officio member. Historic Preservation Commission, we have 3 vacancies for 3-year terms that begin on January 1 of 2020, 1 vacancy for an alternate member for a 3-year term. The Housing Trust Fund Committee, we have 1 vacancy for a term beginning on February of 2020 and 1 at-large vacancy for a term ending on January 31st of 2020. Mahaska County Emergency Management, we have a vacancy for a 2-year term that begins on January 1st of 2020. The Mahaska County Solid Waste Management Commission and Recycling Committee, there are 5 vacancies for 1-year terms beginning on January 1st of 2020. The Stephen Memorial Animal Shelter, there's 1 vacancy for a 2-year term. That begins on January 1 of 2020. And the Water Board, 1 vacancy for an unexpired term ending on June of 2022. Moving on to item B is to consider a motion to receive and file the audit report and authorize payment of $10,950 to Martin and Company. $850 would go to the Auditor of State. And so at this time, would you please come to the podium and tell us about our audit?
Thank you. My name is Rick Atterbury, managing partner of Martins and Company, CPA firm in West Des Moines, Iowa. And we prepared the audit report that you have before you for the year ended June 30th, 2019. I want to thank all the staff, Mike and Amy and Pam and everybody that everyone was very helpful and cooperative in the performance of the audit, and anything we requested they got for us, so that always makes things go smoother when we have good cooperation. Just try and make this brief in terms of the report. As you know, it's a fairly lengthy report with a lot of different sections, and I've kind of gone over that in years past. Just kind of point out some of the sections on page 5, 6, and 7 is our opinion on the financial statements. We've issued what we call an unmodified opinion, which is the type of opinion that you want to receive. It essentially says that we haven't modified the report to anything that we found that wasn't appropriate or was not properly presented. The report is presented on the cash basis of accounting, which is the same basis of accounting that the city has maintained their records for many years, and which also the way most cities in Iowa maintain their records. The section immediately behind that, the management's discussion and analysis, is probably a good section for you to, if you want to read something in detail, read that one in detail, because that really highlights what happened during the year, what things were up and what was down, and why, in a brief way, as far as why things were up or down in all the different particular funds, whatever. So that gives you a good recap of what the rest of the report kind of says. Immediately behind that are the primary financial statements of the city. The statement of activities on 16 and 17 kind of lumps everything together, all the governmental and proprietary funds, and kind of brings them all together on that. The schedule behind that is the governmental funds, which includes the largest funds that have the most activity for the city, are highlighted on that page on 16 or 18 and 19. And page 21 is the proprietary funds, your sewer and stormwater, and also highlight some of the other smaller funds. And behind that are the notes to the financial statement, which gives you a lot of explanation of some of the particular numbers and some of the type of things. Gives you your more description of your debt issues and what the debt repayment terms are and over the years, and a bunch of other footnotes that provide more explanatory versions of what affects the financial statements and what contingencies in terms of potential liabilities that could be out there in the future, such as the pension liabilities for IFRS and the municipal fire and police retirement system along that line. 42 and 43 is your comparison to the budget. You notice there's adjustments there. It was to back out the waterworks, which, as in the past, waterworks is not incorporated into this audit report. They have a separate audit that is done, but the budget that the city submits does include the waterworks, so we adjust the budget to remove the waterworks activity, so that it's actually comparing what you actually did versus what you budgeted for the year. And it's good you didn't go over budget in any of the functions, which is always what you hope to strive. There's some disclosure and schedules on retirements there behind that on IPERS and info fire. And then there's some other schedules behind that are some that recap all the smaller funds of the city that are kind of the minor in terms of dollar amounts as far as other than there's a nice schedule there as far as the recap the capital projects that you had a fair amount of activity in last year as far as capital projects, so that's a little more involved in there with Lacey Roads improvement and South D Street reconstruction. There were some big ones in there. Behind that is your scheduled indebtedness. It shows what your bonds and notes that you have outstanding. And page 66, I haven't referred to it yet, but that's as it was last year, you had what we call a single audit this year, and that's because of the federal funding that you received last year. You received a little over $2 million, or you spent a little over $2 million of federal funding. Whenever you get over $750,000, it requires this additional schedule to be in there and some other filings that we have to do for in terms of federal audit. And they refer to excuse me, referred to as a single audit. And that, as far as that terminology, if you wonder why that goes back a number of years when every grant had to be audited separately many years ago, and then they passed an act called the Single Audit Act that said no, now you can just kind of incorporate it into one audit report as opposed to having a separate audit for every grant that you ever get. So that's where the single audit terminology comes from on that line. Behind there is some of the findings, but there really isn't anything in there in the findings other than to say basically everything's been done properly. You didn't exceed the budget. We didn't see any expenditures that weren't considered proper along that line. So basically, we're just saying that we didn't find anything that we needed to bring to your attention that was anything of any significance. Overall, the cash balances of the city were up 5.1%, the largest increase occurring in the sewer funds. But that was somewhat designed because you've got a lot of expenditures coming forward in the sewer activity, and so that you're trying to build up some of the funds in there to help finance some expensive future sewer projects that you have started and will be doing in the future. Funds that showed the most decrease include the general fund was down 13%, and the capital projects fund was down somewhat, but the capital projects was because you're spending some of the money that you'd borrowed before to construct the capital project, so it's just actually happening the way it's supposed to be happening in terms of why that's down. Total receipts increased by $2.1 million. That's primarily due to the federal grants that you got that helped pay for some of the projects. That's ongoing and will probably continue in fiscal year 20. Total disbursements also increased $2.5 million, or 16%, with most of this coming from the capital projects that you're doing with the sewer and street projects. Your debt load increased 22%, or about $1.9 million. Again, with financing to be able to construct these projects is where a lot of that is going for. Wasn't any new footnote disclosures this year that were anything to draw to your attention along that line. Overall, I think the city appears to maintain a healthy, sound financial position. It's good for to be continuing on the way they have. But, that's essentially all I wanted to bring to your attention about the report. Certainly be happy to try and answer any questions if you have any at this point.
On page 34, and this may not be a question for you, it may be a question for us. But you show that as a possibility of 1% decrease and 1% increase.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do with that?
Well, it's nothing that you do with at this point. It's just it's something that's kind of hanging out there. I mean, that's that's dealing with IPERS, and in terms of what their IPERS is currently, I think it's like 83% funded.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if IPERS stopped today, they wouldn't have enough money to pay everybody throughout their retirement. But and when IPERS. And all these numbers come from IPERS, by the way, because they have a separate audit of them. And the 1% in their actuarial assumptions, they're assuming that they're going to earn 7% return on their money every year. It's what we call the discount rate. Well, so the 1% decrease is kind of a hypothetical situation that, okay, well, what if they only make 6% instead of 7% on their money? Well, then the liability potentially for the city would
Because we have to cover
grow.
that.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's kind of what that's saying. It's, as long as everything continues to keep going, I mean, it keeps rolling forward or whatever. And in terms of Iowa and IPERS, they're probably one of the stronger states in the United States in terms of their state pension programs. Not number one, but they're a long ways from being the worst state in the United States in terms of how they've funded and invested their.
So you did your job and pointed it out, but there's
Right.
really nothing we can do here.
Not at this point.
It's just
No,
in
it's
case it
something-
happens.
Something
And
to
I'm
be,
sure
kind of in the
Michael's
back
aware
of your mind that, if the economy tanks, that gives the city more exposure to be able to, if
Well, we've been
IPERS comes
through
back,
that,
say they
yeah.
gotta raise rates
Okay,
to be
yeah.
able to keep paying everybody's retirement
Thank you.
contributions or something.
Yeah. And this note is probably required somewhere. It's not
Yeah.
something you dreamed up on your own.
No.
Otherwise,
I
really
would never
nice
have
job.
done-
This is
I never
cool.
would have dreamed that one up, no.
Any other comments? Okay, Mr. Henry, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe we have, the agenda item requires some action here as far as receiving and filing the report and then authorizing the payment of $10,950 to Martins and Company and $850 to the Auditor of State. Do we have a motion supporting that?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Calgery,
Yes.
Drost,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Addison.
Yes.
Walling,
Yes.
Yates,
Yes.
Burnett,
Yes.
Okay, that passes. Item C is to consider a resolution approving an agreement with McClure Engineering Company to provide services for a possible transfer of jurisdiction to state highways. City of Oskaloosa previously engaged in discussions with the Iowa Department of Transportation for a possible transfer of jurisdiction of US Highway 63, what we call Market Street, State Highway 92, which is A Avenue, and State Highway 23, we call it 17th Street, that's within the city corporate limits. Staff is recommending to engage the professional services of McClure Engineering Company to provide support and coordination in accomplishing this intent for a possible transfer of jurisdiction of the state highways. Scope of work would include, but not necessarily be limited, to facilitating the discussion with the Iowa DOT, providing project management and engineering support to aid in the negotiations and discussions, and developing a negotiation strategy for the possible transfer of jurisdiction. Staff is recommending the City Council approve this resolution authorizing the agreement with McClure for an amount not to exceed $15,000. Do we have a motion supporting that?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
I'm not sure it's exactly this, but I need to ask. There's a lot of interest, and I assume you guys are getting the questions too, about A Avenue and the 3-lane, because it's been discussed. And I want to make sure what I'm telling everybody is, whether it's 3 or 4, that hasn't been decided yet. And the DOT, of course, if they don't do this, the DOT said all we gotta do is tell them which way we want it. Am I repeating that correctly?
Well, there are going to be a couple of issues there. One is ongoing operations of A and Market Street, so as they stand right now, under the control of the DOT. And some of that was presented during the traffic safety studies that the council had accepted, and DOT, we had worked with them to look at a few options to make our roads safer. And one of those obviously was to move from 4 to 3 lane. At that time, I believe the direction we received was we were good to go with the 3 lane, but we were trying to figure out what the DOT was going to do with rehabilitation of the roadway. I didn't think anybody had any concerns with 3 laning south, so everything south of Market Street, or excuse me, A Avenue. The concern was, what about everything west
Yes.
as we head west? And I'm pretty sure the consensus was we're good to D Street, no objections there. And once we got past D Street, there was a little less support from council, but there was still, I thought, direction to move forward. We have not initiated those conversations. Obviously, the DOT's come in, they've done their painting. So we have not asked them to convert to 3 lane, and we haven't budgeted to do that work yet either. So there's still more to be done there, but at least my understanding or recollection of the discussion was we were okay with going to 3 lane.
Okay. But why I brought it up, and I appreciate you saying it again. Okay, we're talking about maybe us taking them over. So it's a chicken or the egg. I mean, if we take them over before what you just said happens, then it's up to us.
Well, it's likely up to us. Yeah, it's likely up to us either. And in either way, we're going to have to pay for it. The DOT just wants to know what we're going to do.
Okay.
The item tonight deals with the 5-year plan of the DOT Commission, including the Northwest Bypass. We have to start thinking about what's the future of Market Street going to be for us, because they are going to hand that over to us. And before they hand that over to us, it would be good for us to negotiate with them and try to maximize the amount of money that we get for ongoing maintenance and long-term care of that roadway. And so it's my opinion, staff's opinion, that we would bring on experts who have dealt with this before, staff that have worked in the DOT but are now on McClure's team, to help us through those conversations, much like we would, a financial advisor or an attorney. We're going to bring them on a retainer, and then they're going to help us make those connections, deal with some of the personalities that are involved, and then, again, help us get to where we need to be as a community before the road gets turned over to us.
Remind me if I remember this right. We inherited the old highway out by the county shop.
Highway 423.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I've lived here longer than you, but you got the number right.
It's still Highway 423, which
Yeah,
still
okay.
kind of
But-
grates me a
but
little bit.
We
but-
inherited it, right?
432, excuse me, 422.
But it's now a city street,
It is.
okay? But if I recall, we fixed it after we inherited it. They didn't fix it before they gave it to us.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
and
good knowledge.
and again, we're trying to, we want to work with them to say, hey, this is how many millions of dollars it's going to take to take care of this facility. It's not in great shape. It's going to need to be rehabbed. But then the money would come to us to, as a city council, you could make a decision on what you want to do with that money. Do you want to save that money up? Well, that's not what the placemaking plan talked about. It was utilizing that money, energizing those funds and putting them into play for other improvements, knowing that you still have to make those improvements to A Avenue eventually. But having the money sit in a bank account earning very little interest, honestly, doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you could capitalize on those funds and generate additional taxable valuation, that has, I think, immediate benefits, which, again, would be to reduce the tax rate, and then eventually when you would have to fix the A Avenue or Market Street or whatever road we're talking about, you would be in a better position financially.
So the point is, there's always a lot of projects
There are more projects
looking
than
at us in the face.
pointed to.
As we discuss what we've discussed tonight, I mean, it's just,
Billy, you're saying though that there's a pretty good ROI on our $15,000 investment here is what you're saying.
Yes, and I think the fair question would be, why are we doing this now? And even I've had that kind of pause, and I'm like, really, do we need to be talking about this when it's 5 years out? I think if we can start I think it's about momentum, and we don't want to lose the DOT's ear in many ways. And I think building that rapport so that we get what we need as a community is important. I think we've been very good at, as a coalition with the East Central Iowa Transportation Coalition, we've been able to get a lot of DOT investment in our community. And I think that's because of some of the relationships that we've built. But we need to take that, again, kind of that next step. And then when we talk about the Southeast Connector, these things all kind of tie into one another. And when we have those relationships, whether it be with us or with consultants that are working on our behalf, it helps. It really does help. And so this is just one more way that we're trying to keep things moving forward.
Well, I totally agree that we keep it on the radar. I mean, and it's good we're looking at it because I think everybody's on the same page about this. One of the bigger goals is to get the trucks out of town. So, I mean, that's...
Absolutely, and that's where that Southeast Connector conversation is vital. And the conversation with the DOT was, well, we don't really want to talk about the Southeast Connector until the Northwest Bypass is built. Well, but we need to have those conversations. We want to keep that conversation going. In fact, we've talked about it internally. Should we be pursuing grant opportunities that might exist so we could accelerate that construction? And so we're working with McClure and we're working with the DOT to figure out if that's something that we can do through other grants that are offered. It's the build grant is what it's called.
Well, I like to continue talking about both those bypasses. I just don't like it when we get the conversation about, okay, if we do the southeast and we go around, we don't need the northwest, because that's not true in my opinion.
Well, and that's been studied. The DOT has put that to rest. I mean, there was really some of that conversation was, should we go northeast? Should the bypass go northeast or northwest? The DOT made the call on that. The study was concluded. But everyone in the conversations understands that for the DOT to get completely out of Oskaloosa, there has to be a full bypass. And that won't occur unless there's a Southeast Connector.
Further comments or questions?
Well, I think we need to have another discussion about the A Avenue, because I'm not for the 3-lane on A. South Market, no problem. That should have been done when they did North Market. But I think we need to have discussions more on A Avenue. Not now, later.
Further comments on McClure? Roll call, please.
Drost,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Addison,
Yes.
Walling,
Yes.
Yates,
Yes.
Burnett,
Yes.
Calgery,
Yes.
That passes. Item D, consider an ordinance amending Chapter 10.48 of the Oskaloosa Municipal Code. This has to do with parking restrictions on Fifth Avenue East between Market Street and 7th Street. Staff received a request for a parking restriction on Fifth Avenue East between South 2nd Street and South 7th Street. Staff decided to extend the parking study on Fifth Avenue East between South Market and South 7th Street to be consistent with the rest of the corridor. This pavement on the Fifth Avenue East varies from 31 feet between South Market Street and South 1st Street, then narrows to 25 feet between South 1st Street and South 7th Street. Restricted pavement width and the lack of parking restriction impedes the movement of emergency vehicles and also makes it difficult for passenger cars to navigate when vehicles are parked on both sides of the road. So as part of the study, staff also researched the crash history of the subject corridor, found that there were a total of 7 reported crashes in the last 5 years. Of these 7 crashes, 5 were resulting in property damage, only 2 resulted in injuries. Survey was sent out to all property owners in the study area, 24 of whom responded. Of the 24 respondents, 10, or 41%, were in favor of a parking restriction on one side of the road. 14, 58%, were opposed to any form of parking restriction. And of the 10 responses in favor of a parking restriction, 1 response favored restriction on the north side of the road and 9 favored restriction on the south side. Staff is recommending a parking restriction on the south side of Fifth Avenue between South Market Street and South 7th Street because it'll help with the flow of passenger vehicles and also help with navigation of emergency vehicles. The parking restriction will also improve visibility at the corner of the street intersections. And so staff is recommending we approve the first reading of the ordinance authorizing the parking restriction on the south side of Fifth Avenue East between South Market Street and South 7th Street Do you have a motion supporting that?
Move.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
I need to understand a little bit more why. It's not a thoroughfare, it's not a busy road. I mean, why are we even messing with it?
The description talked about emergency vehicles. Is there any more to go with that, Mike?
Mayor, Council, I think for consistency's sake, at least if the vehicles are all on one side, then our vehicles, we know that we can get through, but I haven't heard any specific complaints from the fire department, and I don't have anybody here tonight, but I don't know if Akila heard anything from public safety.
We didn't hear specific concerns. I mean, there's access problems when there's parked vehicles on both sides. You cannot navigate a fire truck.
The road is narrow.
It is 25
That is a
feet.
narrow street.
So
So it's narrower, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, there was mention of 7 crashes in the crash history and 2 of them involving injuries. Was there any particular intersection or anything that?
So I looked into the crash data. There were, of those 7 crashes, I think 2 were directly because of on-street parked vehicles. There were a lot of crashes at intersections. Now, what I don't know is these crashes at the intersections were because of restricted visibility from on-street parked vehicles or not. I was not able to conclude.
Are they uncontrolled intersections?
There's a lot of uncontrolled.
There is some uncontrolled.
I think there's some yield signs in there, and
Some uncontrolled.
There's 2 or 3 uncontrolled
I
intersections.
guess that's
there
not
at least.
uncontrolled if it's a yield sign, is that right? Yeah, okay.
Do we know, I mean, it says that we received a request. I'm just curious what part of Fifth Avenue that request came from.
That came from Councilmember
Yeah, I received a
Okay.
call from a constituent that lives on South Second that asked that it be studied.
Okay.
And I think your concern was between 2nd and 7th.
Yeah, that was what was requested of me, that we take a look at it, yes.
Okay.
So when we allow parking on the street, they do have to remain parked away from the intersection a certain distance, don't they?
Yeah, I think our code says 10 feet from the intersection, 10 feet from driveways and intersections.
Did they give a reason why? I mean, I don't care who it is, I'm just, it was,
Boy, it's been a while ago. I just brought it up and I can't remember. I may still have the voice message. But it had to do with something at 7th with the school, I believe.
And I can, having had kids attend the pre-K at the old Webster School, I know what they're talking about on the west side of 7th there, and the traffic when you're dropping kids off, picking them up, and it is congested and hard to get through there. But I do question whether it needs to be the full length all the way to Market, especially since we just redid that street between Market and First. It's now 31 feet wide. And, I mean, we just had that discussion about what's the width of streets and parking one side versus not. And, I mean, 31 feet is a pretty wide street through a residential neighborhood. But the 25 feet I totally get. But I think if you're going through town from one end to the other, 3rd and 6th are the ones to go on, not 5th. So unless you live on that street, you're not, I mean, again, picking up your kids from the Webster School and you're going to the west side of town, most people, I don't think, are going to be traveling on Fifth Avenue. They're going to pick up the kids and get to 6th or 3rd as fast as they can. Now, again, with a 25-foot wide street, the safety piece of it is valid.
well, there's 14 people that don't want to change it. And at least one of those is a business.
Which one's a business?
Yeah, 516.
He's got a security.
They're right on the corner of South First. The northeast corner of South First.
So we have revised the survey since we submitted it to the council. There's 14 people in favor, 16 opposed to the parking restrictions.
So there's, okay, there's more than the 14, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there's 16 opposed and 14. in
16
favor.
want to leave it the way it is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
14, yeah, 16 want
Okay.
to leave it as it is. So.
And
Can I just go back to our discussion from the work session? 25 feet, and I think of a car parked on both sides. Can you get through there? I mean,
Depends how the cars are parked, across from one another.
and that's my point. If you,
Yeah.
and there's no reason they can't be if
Right.
you have it on both sides.
I mean, if they're parked like
Generally,
this.
a car is, if it's parked, is about 8 feet of parking space on one side of the street. So there's 2 cars, 8 and 8 is 16. So 25 minus 6, 16 is about 9 feet. So a car can pass through 9 feet lanes, but they'll have to back up if there's a car somewhere, they'll have to stop and yield for the car on the opposite direction. Now, whether a fire truck can go, it can be, 9 feet, becomes pretty tight at times, so.
well, you got my attention with that, Achilles. I mean, if for public safety, but other than that, I guess I'd like to know why whoever it was, I don't care who it is, but what were they thinking? Why they recommended it or asked for it?
And I'll go back and listen
Well,
to the
I'm not
message.
trying to put you on the
I just
spot.
can't
I mean,
remember. It's
we can
been
find out.
several weeks ago. But
So the parking restrictions that are being recommended is along is that right, the south side for the entire length from Market over to 7th, even though we have a 31-foot width in the first couple of blocks as you come off of Market.
that goes into Second Street. That's 31 foot.
No, it's just first.
First,
Also
Market?
just the first block.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
31
this one,
feet right
yeah.
here.
And help me again with where the business is. Somebody knew that.
718, the first, second red, there you go.
That's a business. This
Or
is
whatever
also a
that is, I
business
can't
too.
read the number, I know where it is.
I don't know how active that.
And it says security in the window or something, is that what that is? I know where that is,
That's
I've
an
always wondered
insurance
about
company.
that. Yeah, I've always wondered about that, if it was, they still.
What
had
were we
business.
talking about? What was the reason that when that street was redone, it was made 31 instead of?
I don't know what
26.
was before, it may have been 31, we didn't go and measure what it was. So I don't think when the street was redone, it was increased or anything. It
Well,
was-
before the post office, it was Big Smith Overall Factory. And so there's probably a lot of traffic, trucks going in and out of there.
So the post office also responded back in favor of a parking restriction on the south side because of their
The post office is for.
movement there.
What other information does the council need before we vote?
Well, I'd like to hear why they requested it. I mean, they might have a very legitimate case, and then I think we should talk to the chiefs or something, about if the big red trucks need, their job is to get there as fast as possible. But when you got that many people, the majority, they live there, and, why do we want to mess with them?
My presumption with the fire department is they understand the routes that are going to be quickest, and so they're going to avoid, if they can, they're going to avoid narrower streets like this unless they're going direct to a property. So, again, if there's no parking on the south side, perhaps that gives them another option for them to choose from. So that would be the one thing I would add. Again, if council doesn't take action on this, again, we're fine. We're operating that way now. As you can tell, these are never These are never easy. Generally speaking, if you survey a large segment like this, you're going to get a split vote. The places where you see the higher traffic, again, at the edges, tend to support this because there are other uses that are near it that cause traffic. So you have the school, the daycare, and then, again, the post office and their traffic. So, again, that's not unexpected from my view of things, but it doesn't necessarily make it any easier for you as council to take a vote. If you wanted to just break this into smaller segments, we could do that as well. But that creates some inconsistencies.
Inconsistency in what way?
Just through that whole area. Then if it's some no parking, others have parking.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I agree. I mean, somebody's gonna talk about, why didn't you do those other
this is a
two
great
blocks?
policy question for council. That's why you're elected.
But if like, for instance, if say we wanted to do something in between 6th and 7th, I mean, that deals with the school, that deals with buses. To me, that wouldn't be an inconsistent issue. That would be a special case issue because of the school and all the traffic there. If you wanted to do something at First, or between Market and First, even though it's a wider street, you would deal with the post office. I'm not saying you would do, but I mean, that to me isn't so much inconsistent. That's dealing with the specifics of that area with the special circumstance.
Yep, I agree.
Now, if you decided to do just between a couple of blocks because no specific reason, then I'd have concern with this being inconsistent.
Well, let's go looking in that direction then. Is there support on council for doing the first block on the west and then also the first block on the east side of the entire Fifth Avenue East? In other words, going from 7th to 6th and going from Market to First.
I agree. Because those are the busiest corners, or the busiest, I guess you call them block, from businesses into school. I've seen it myself, especially on this side.
Did we have motions?
Yeah, we did.
Who made them? It seems like I was part of that. I can't remember. It was a couple hours ago.
Burnett, no. Yeah, and Yates.
Okay. Thought I was involved.
The only question I would have with the Market to First piece, if we're gonna split this thing up, is why put the restriction on the widest part of the road? I mean, it's 31 feet. You can park both sides, and
I guess I would make there's motion on the table, but I'd like to hear what the people that brought this up, why they wanted it. And then you're talking about this, and I'm sure you're right about the buses down at the old school, but they aren't coming to us. So let's ask them. I mean, other than that, I'll be glad to vote no, but I just.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm wondering is if there's a need for more information, we can vote no on this and then bring it back at a future council meeting.
Yeah, good idea.
My vote's no, and I don't need any more information. Just saying, so.
Yep. Okay. Anybody have any other further comments or questions?
No,
I
let's
think maybe
vote.
that's the direction
I'll
to
call
go.
for the question.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Moore,
No.
Addison,
No.
Walling,
No.
Yates,
No.
Burnett,
Nope.
Bellinger,
No.
Drost,
no.
Okay. That fails unanimously. Okay. Item E. So consider an ordinance amending Oskaloosa City Code 10.48.060, adding a new subsection relative to off-street parking on other than a hard surface in the city limits. It's a second reading. Staff expressed a desire to have a new provision made to address off-street parking on other than hard surfaces. It's currently prohibited by city ordinance, but under the current ordinance, violations have to be prosecuted as municipal infractions, which can be time-consuming, cumbersome, and costly. Staff proposes that similar provisions be added to Chapter 10.48.060, so violations can alternatively be pursued by citations issued by city police rather than the more time-consuming municipal infraction methodology. So do we have a motion supporting the second reading?
So moved. Second.
Okay. Any discussion on it? Roll call, please.
Coniston?
Yes.
Walling?
Yes.
Yates?
Yes.
Burnett?
Yes.
Calgery?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Okay, that passes. This gets us towards the end of the regular agenda. There's an opportunity for a closed session afterwards. Reports from city staff. City manager.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, within the packet is an update from staff concerning the visit that we had at the last meeting from Ms. Tyler Parks and her concerns about the property at 907 South B. As you can see, there's some information about the city's attempt to get in touch with the property owner. And then obviously, since this memo was put out on Friday, I gave you another update, which included that the city attorney was successful in getting an administrative search warrant granted by the courts. Our staff out of the Development Services Department went, along with the police department and a pest professional. He visited the property and confirmed that there was a problem at the property, and so we began immediate treatment at the site. The report was due back to us this week, and again, I think that recommendation is to have another treatment this week to eliminate the problem. So the property management company that's dealing with the foreclosure didn't seem to understand the urgency. They finally got back to staff after a week of continuously calling them. They said they're willing to make things happen, but direction to staff has been, we're going to continue to be in the driver's seat on this. We'll continue to deal with it, and if there are invoices, we'll send them to that company. Otherwise, we'll assess them. So we're continuing to treat it, and hopefully this will be resolved soon.
Anything else?
No, sir.
City clerk, anything?
No, sir, thank you.
City attorney, anything?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay. Council members, Steve, anything?
No, sir.
Okay, Tom?
I'm curious about the trees. We're putting in more trees, and I'm a tree hugger. Are those from us? Or is it Trees Forever helping?
So Trees Forever planted, I believe, 85 trees on Saturday with the assistance of at least 30 people, if I had to guess. And it went relatively quickly. That's a fundraising effort that nonprofit, that group does on their own. We, obviously, if we can help them out, we will. So our staff coordinated the auger digging for the tree placement within the right-of-way.
Well, I saw them. And we did, earlier this year, we did a lot of trees in around St. Mary's Church, in that part of the neighborhood, and we're putting them in the row, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Look great.
This is,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
No. On Peggy Grafke's, there was anything in today. I mean, we're still, that's in the works, right? To give her an answer.
And Tom, if I can speak to that, excuse me if I can jump in. Obviously, I missed the last meeting. I was traveling to my daughter's place. I understand there were discussions about that. I've prepared a draft of an agreement with the supporting documentation and got that to Mike just today.
Okay, so it's on the works.
Right.
And I just want to say it's a great job on that Tyler issue with the bugs. The city, all staff responded so quickly. Pretty good for government.
Okay.
See,
Doug?
not all that bad.
Nothing nicer.
Okay. Scotty? Diane? Nothing
No,
to
sir.
do? No? I've got nothing at this point either. And so I guess at this point I'll ask if there is a motion to go into a closed session.
So moved.
Well,
Second.
and then I think Dave and I tag team on this. It would be under Iowa Code Section 21.5, paren 1J, to discuss the purchase of particular real estate only where premature disclosure could be reasonably expected to increase the price that the governmental body would have to pay for that property. City manager is requesting it. And Dave, there's some additional language, isn't there?
With this one, there is not. That's simply when we're discussing litigation where they require the other.
So it's a pleasure not to be discussing litigation. Got to remember that. Okay, so do we have a motion supporting that?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Roll call, please.
Walling?
Yes.
Yates?
Yes.
Burnett?
Yes.
Calgery?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Coniston?
Yes.
Okay, that passes. So we'll go into closed session at this time and dismiss the audience. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, we are back in open session. We've had our conversation, and I'm looking for a motion to authorize a listing agreement with Hawkeye Farm Management and Real Estate for the Oskaloosa Municipal Airport.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Burnett,
Yes.
Calgery,
Yes.
Dross,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Coniston.
Yes.
Walling,
Yes.
Yates.
Yes.
Okay, that passes. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.